What's up, pen friends? Got a lot of free time on my hands, and today I'm going to be using that free time to talk about an ink, specifically Van Diemen's Abyss. But first, Van Diemen's was started by a husband and wife from Australia, specifically Tasmania, which is probably one of the coolest places that a business can be from. The company is not named after the owners. While the island, Tasmania, is known as Tasmania today, it was known as Van Diemen's Land from 1642 to 1856. Anthony Van Diemen was a wealthy governor of the Dutch East Indies Company, and he sponsored Dutch explorer Abel Tasman, and it was his expedition that first sighted the island. He named it Anthony Van Diemen's Land because Van Diemen paid for the expedition, and they called it that for a while, and eventually they changed it to be named after the guy who actually sighted it. So that's where the name comes from. It doesn't affect the ink at all. I just find it interesting. And I also find Abyss interesting. So let's talk about it. Van Diemen's Abyss is a very dark, incredibly matte black. It was formulated specifically to be as matte as possible, so no light can escape the abyss. Van Diemen's uses different bottle designs for the different sizes that they offer. They come in a 30 milliliter and a 40 milliliter option, with some inks coming in 100 milliliters. The 30 milliliter, which is what I got, comes in a bottle that looks like this. The packaging is also pretty cool. It matches the bottle. And it's got this sick little kangaroo to let you know that it's from Australia. These 30 milliliter bottles I've seen going for anywhere between 12 and 18 US dollars, which is a pretty big discrepancy. And the 40 milliliters I've seen going for around $20. The best place to buy this currently is Endless Pens, because if you use my code listed down in the description, you will get 10% off of the already low price. The bottle itself is okay. It's stable. It's an interesting shape. You can lean it on its side to get down to this area and then accidentally spill it over if you're so inclined. I would not recommend that. The mouth of the bottle is relatively narrow. I would definitely prefer that they had a wider mouth. I can see some pens having an issue fitting in here, but it's just a bottle and it works. I haven't had any issues with it, and what's really important is the ink that's inside. So we're gonna go over my writing tests. Here we have Clairefontaine. We have Tomoe River. We have Graffilo. And we have B7, which is not B7 size. That's the name of the paper. It's a stupid name, but it's a great paper, so I'm gonna use it. Now, there's some really interesting things about Van Diemen's Abyss that I want to mention. The first being how matte it dries. You are not going to get any sheen on this at all, and I love that. My preference is for the most matte you can get in a black, and with all of the inks that I've tested so far, this is definitely the most matte out there. Another interesting thing, though, is that it is a very confusing color. You can see here, there's a lot of blue in this ink. When you get it wet and the ink spreads out, the blue shows up a lot. However, when it's dry, when you're just writing with it, it looks like it has a very brown undertone. So much so that this is probably up there as one of the darkest brown looking inks that I've ever used. And generally, I do not like brown leaning black inks. However, because it's so matte and so dark, I don't mind that this one is a brown leaning black. Now, as far as performance goes, Van Diemen's Abyss is kind of a mixed bag because it takes forever to dry. On every single testing, including Clairefontaine, it took over a minute for this ink to dry. And Clairefontaine likes to absorb ink and dry really quickly, so That's kind of impressive. I would say that this is probably one of the slowest drying inks I've ever seen. But on the other hand, it doesn't bleed and it doesn't feather on anything, including pretty bad paper, and it flows amazingly. It's not so wet that it just gushes out, but it is wet where it feels like it's lubricated and it feels like you're gliding across the page. It does shade, mostly on very broad nibs where the ink spreads out a lot, or on very dry nibs where there's not a lot of ink being put down. But you will see it's the very dark black with patches of that brown, that mysterious brown that confuses me. It's not a ton of shading, but it's there, it's noticeable. You'll see it in pretty much every pen you use, even if it's not a lot of it. But there's absolutely no sheen. I put down on my testing 1 box of sheen because light does reflect off of it. You can't have absolutely no sheening because it's not a black hole. So it exists, but it's essentially not there. And it is a black ink, which means it's super readable. Blacks are the standard because they're readable. And as far as permanence goes, just like the ocean abyss, if you don't take care of it, you're gonna destroy everything. You are not gonna recover anything that you write within a splotch of wetness. It is completely gone. It does make a very pretty bluish splotch, but your writing is gonna be gone. So do not get this wet. I recommend you don't get your writing wet in general, but in this case, you were going to lose what you wrote completely. So be careful. Now that that's out of the way, I'm gonna do a drawing sample while I go over my final thoughts. I love matte black inks, and you can't get much more matte than Van Dieman's Abyss. Unfortunate for me personally, I don't really like black inks with a brown undertone, and Abyss has the strongest brown undertone I've seen in any black ink. However, it has so much else going for it, I can overlook the brown hue. It's super smooth and lubricated. It doesn't bleed or feather at all. It takes a pretty long time to dry, and it isn't water resistant at all. One good thing about the complete lack of water resistance is that it's super easy to clean out of your pens, and for someone like me who is constantly churning out different inks to test them, that is a lifesaver. If you are concerned about staining your pen or clogging your pen, you do not have to worry with Van Dieman's Abyss. Also, being from Tasmania is cool, which doesn't affect the ink at all, but I think is worth something. If you want a black ink that looks like it might pull you into the page like it's a black hole, Van Dieman's Abyss is worth checking out. I like this ink so much that I used up the sample I got and then went out and bought a full bottle, so that should tell you what I think about this. At this point, I've tried a whole bunch of black inks, and I can safely say that Van Dieman's Abyss is now in my top 3 favorites. I have a couple more black inks that I'm going to be going over before I switch over to doing some more colors. And once I'm done with those black inks, I'm going to do a roundup of all of the blacks that I've tried so far. And I can't say for sure if it's become my #1 favorite black ink, but it is definitely near the top. Anyway, hope you liked the video. That was Van Dieman's Abyss. If you liked the video, leave a thumbs up. If you didn't, leave a thumbs down. Smash that bell icon, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube junk. If you've tried Van Dieman's Abyss, let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Links on where to buy this ink are listed in the description, as well as a link to my Instagram, which is where I post most of my doodles. So if you want to see more of my drawings and less of my talking, go there to check that out. Anyway, that's all I have today. I hope you have the best day. Goodbye. Gold foil, shiny.